Imagine a civilization that built cities of pure gold, whose knowledge and technology were orders of magnitude ahead of our own. They ruled the world, until in the blink of an eye they were wiped off the face of the earth, leaving behind almost no trace, save for a whisper of horror in ancient legends. Atlantis, the most desired and most controversial enigma in human history. A myth? Or the chilling truth about a lost world? For over 2,500 years, I've been searching for answers. But the deeper I dig, the more there surface not just myths, but frightening facts, findings on the ocean floor that science cannot explain, ancient texts hinting at technologies we still don't possess, and myths that speak not only of grandeur, but also of vice, pride, and the bloody price this civilization paid. We are embarking on a journey where every stop will be a shock, from the first mentions that seem too detailed for a fairy tale, through epochs when people believed Atlanteans were giants who founded all great cultures, to theories that link Atlantis' demise to global catastrophes capable of annihilating modern humanity. But the most important and the most intriguing thing is hidden where almost no one dares to look, on the ocean floor, and in theories that science has declared forbidden. In this video, you will discover what underground and underwater structures still puzzle scientists. Could Atlanteans truly possess anti-gravity and crystalline energy? And why do some ancient prophecies foretell the return of Atlantis? Prepare for a story that will turn your understanding of the past upside down. It will reveal secrets that might have been deliberately hidden from us. The most shocking, the most eerie, and the most important discovery awaits you at the very end of this video. Stay with us. The dive begins. Imagine this: a thriving empire whose technology was ahead of its time, whose cities shone with gold, and whose power stretched to distant lands. And suddenly, it vanished. It didn't just decline, it wasn't conquered. No, an entire civilization, the greatest that ever existed, sank beneath the waves in a single terrifying night, leaving behind only whispers of legends and an eternal enigma. For over 2.5 millennia, this mysterious island has haunted me, as it has countless explorers and dreamers. Get ready, because our story is about to begin. The story of Atlantis. Why has this phantom taken such deep root in our consciousness? After all, it constantly appears in countless books, films, and traditions, invariably inspiring and enchanting people worldwide. Since the time of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, humanity has ceaselessly tormented itself with the question: could this great island, inhabited by a prosperous and powerful civilization, have truly existed and then vanished without a trace from the face of the earth? Or is it merely a captivating legend, born of boundless imagination, completely devoid of any historical foundation? My predecessors and I have searched literally every corner of the planet for Atlantis. It has been sought everywhere: in the vast Atlantic Ocean, in the azure Mediterranean Sea, off the rugged coasts of America, and even in the icy waters near Antarctica. Some saw it as the most ancient cradle of human civilization. Others imagined it as a colossal metropolis whose technology was orders of magnitude ahead of its time. Incredible theories even emerged about a mysterious race of giants who, according to tradition, ruled the world and erected truly astonishing structures. Today, questions about the existence and demise of Atlantis still vastly outnumber answers, and each new hypothesis only plunges us deeper into this unsolved mystery. For centuries, Atlantis has been overgrown with incredible legends, fantastic theories, and astonishing assumptions. But what does modern science say about this? our cutting-edge technologies, profound archaeological discoveries, and the latest geological research finally capable of helping us unveil this mysterious page in human history. Today, I will embark with you on a thrilling journey through the ages to unravel this centuries-old enigma. We will begin our descent with the very first, barely discernible mentions of Atlantis in ancient sources. Then I will guide you through the gloom of the Middle Ages and the dawn of the Renaissance. I will explore the most captivating and sometimes insane hypotheses of the 19th and 20th centuries, and then introduce you to the latest, sometimes shocking scientific discoveries and research. Together, we will try to shed light on this mystery, to understand where in the story of Atlantis ancient myth ends and undeniable reality begins. Prepare to hear, perhaps, the most intriguing and breathtaking story that the ancient world could possibly leave for me and all humanity. But where, in reality, did the name Atlantis itself come from? When it comes to this lost world, the first name that invariably comes to my mind, and indeed to the mind of all humanity, is the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. It is he who is rightly considered the person who first introduced this enigmatic land to the world, which became one of humanity's most brilliant and alluring legends. In the 5th century BC, over 2.5 millennia ago, Plato presented the world with two of his famous philosophical dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. These works are not just dry philosophical treatises, but a complete, detailed narrative about a long-vanished civilization whose greatness preceded the rise of classical Greece. Plato's dialogues are skillfully structured in the form of a conversation between several wise men and philosophers, among whom appear real historical figures. For instance, in the narrative, I encounter the name of the famous Athenian legislator and sage Solon, who lived approximately 200 years before Plato himself. According to the narrative, Solon undertook a journey to distant Egypt, and there, in the temple of the city of Sais, he met with powerful priests. It was these Egyptian custodians of ancient knowledge who, according to Plato, related to Solon the centuries-old story of the mighty island state of Atlantis, which flourished many millennia ago and then suddenly perished in the depths of a terrifying catastrophe. Upon returning to his native Athens, Solon recounted this incredible story to his relative Dropides, who, in turn, passed it on to his son, Critias the elder, and he to his grandson, Critias the younger. It is this Critias the younger, a direct participant in Plato's dialogues, who became my guide into this legend. In the dialogues themselves, Plato presents this tradition through the mouth of the philosopher Critias, his own blood relative. This clever device creates a powerful illusion of historical authenticity and lends incredible credibility to the narrative, which is why the story of Atlantis was perceived by many from the very beginning as a genuine, albeit tragic, event of the distant past. What specifically does Plato relate about Atlantis? First and foremost, he gives me and all researchers an astonishingly clear geographical description of the island, which still serves as a starting point for all further searches and conjectures about its mysterious location. Plato categorically states that Atlantis was located beyond the so-called Pillars of Heracles. The ancient Greeks perceived this place as the boundary of their known world, the strait between Europe and Africa, now recognized by us as the Strait of Gibraltar. Such an indication unequivocally directed our gaze towards the Atlantic Ocean, which the Greeks conceived of as a vast, unexplored, and literally mystery-infused space. Plato describes the island of Atlantis as a colossal landmass, significantly surpassing in size any land known to the Greeks of that time. According to his descriptions, the island was larger than Libya and Asia combined. as the ancient Greeks referred to the known parts of Africa and Asia. In the heart of this colossal island was a majestic capital city whose layout was quite unusual and astonishing. The city consisted of several concentric rings of land and water, skillfully connected by bridges and canals. This unique structure allowed the metropolis to be simultaneously wonderfully protected and unbelievably beautiful. The Atlanteans achieved truly impressive success in engineering, architecture, and urban planning. Their capital was a genuine model of well-designed urban infrastructure, whose grandeur still amazes me. The city was traversed by a branched network of canals that served as a vital transport artery. These canals skillfully connected the outer districts with the very heart of the metropolis, ensuring flourishing trade and incredibly comfortable movement for residents. The Atlanteans also created convenient harbors and special docks, positioned so that merchant ships could enter directly into the city center unimpeded. This made their trade phenomenally efficient and strengthened Atlantis's economic dominance. The Atlanteans were masterful shipbuilders and fearless seafarers, which allowed them to engage in vibrant trade with distant lands and establish strong ties with other peoples. A special key place in Atlantis's architecture was occupied by the Temple of Poseidon, proudly rising on the central island of the capital. This temple, according to Plato, was a majestic, dazzling structure whose walls were richly covered with gold and silver. Inside the sanctuary, I am struck by the description of an impressive golden statue of Poseidon on a chariot pulled by mighty winged horses. This temple served not only as a center of religious life, but also as a shining symbol of the Atlanteans' cultural and technical development, their boundless power. Furthermore, the Atlanteans created a truly advanced water and sewage system, skillfully utilizing hot and cold springs for public baths and luxurious fountains. This ensured a level of sanitation and incredible comfort of life in the city unthinkable for that era. A crucial part of the capital's infrastructure was powerful fortifications, impregnable walls, and formidable towers built with the highest engineering skill. They effectively protected the city from any external threats and loudly emphasized its grandeur and unshakable might. However, Atlantis, according to Plato, turned out to be far from perfect. Over time, the Atlanteans lost their moral bearings and plunged into a vortex of excessive pride, greed, and ruthless cruelty. Forgetting the true values that had made them great, they audaciously began to claim absolute power over other peoples, for which they were doomed to retribution. In the finale of this tragic story, the gods, angered by their arrogance, decided to punish Atlantis, unleashing a terrifying natural disaster upon it. As a result of powerful earthquakes and all-consuming floods, the island literally sank into the sea abyss in a single day and vanished from the face of the earth forever, leaving behind only a sorrowful legend and an unsolvable riddle for us, their descendants. It is astonishing how skillfully Plato managed to cloak his legend in such a strikingly convincing form. The narrative of Atlantis, so masterfully presented by him, turned out to be so detailed and compelling that for millennia, many people have perceived it as authentic historical testimony. However, even in deep antiquity, some authors expressed doubts about the authenticity of this story and wondered, did Atlantis truly exist? Or was it merely a brilliant philosophical allegory created by Plato to vividly illustrate ideas about human morality, destructive pride, and the inevitable punishment that follows arrogance? Modern scientists continue to actively debate the reliability of Plato's sources to this day. Many researchers lean towards the opinion that Plato could well have used scattered ancient myths and fragments of oral traditions. However, undeniable historical evidence confirming the authenticity of his account, alas, is absent. Some scholars are convinced that the story of Atlantis was entirely invented by Plato himself for the most effective transmission of his philosophical and moral lessons. Others concede that he might indeed have heard a similar story in Egypt, although specific confirmations of this have not yet been found either. Thus, the attitude of scientists towards Plato's sources remains extremely cautious and critical, constantly emphasizing that the story of Atlantis retains the status of primarily a captivating and incredibly mysterious tale from an ancient philosopher. And although Plato is the main and practically the only significant ancient Greek author who described Atlantis in such detail, the attitude of the ancient Greeks themselves towards this account was, to put it mildly, mixed. Even Plato's contemporaries and immediate followers fiercely debated whether this story could be considered authentic or was merely a skillful philosophical myth. For instance, Plato's student, the famous philosopher Aristotle, was quite skeptical of his teacher's narrative. He regarded Atlantis solely as a parable created by Plato to illustrate his deep philosophical and moral ideas. From Aristotle's perspective, the story of Atlantis had no real historical basis and was merely a symbolic story about destructive human pride. Even the famous ancient Greek geographer Strabo also expressed his deep doubts about the authenticity of Atlantis. In his extensive works, he only briefly mentions Plato's account, noting that the description of the island looks more like a symbolic story than an undeniable historical fact. Plutarch, another authoritative ancient Greek author, mentioned Atlantis, but he too treated it as an allegorical account, having a far more moral than historical meaning. But not only Greek, but also the mysterious Egyptian tradition plays a key role in the origin of the legend of Atlantis. Plato persistently emphasized that Solon originally heard this story specifically from Egyptian priests. The priests from the city of Sais, like guardians of eternity, claimed that they had carefully preserved traditions about Atlantis for many thousands of years. They persistently pointed out that the Greeks, alas, had forgotten their most ancient history due to endless destruction and catastrophes, while in Egypt their tradition had been continuously preserved like a great river through many generations. Indeed, the temple of the goddess Neith in Sais, where Solon, as I know, drew the story of Atlantis, was renowned as a crucial center of knowledge and an inexhaustible repository of ancient texts. Egyptian culture has been famous since antiquity for its unique system of recording historical and mythological events, which were carefully, like treasures, passed down from generation to generation. Egyptian priests could indeed possess unique information about events of the distant past based on ancient records in papyri and on majestic temple walls where various natural catastrophes, bloody wars, and other significant events were meticulously recorded. In Egyptian historical and religious texts, I often find mentions of major floods, earth-shaking earthquakes, and other natural disasters, which could well have served as a powerful basis for the story of the catastrophic demise of Atlantis. Perhaps the Egyptian priests used precisely such ancient traditions in their conversation with Solon to persistently emphasize the importance of preserving the memory of catastrophes and to remind of the destructive danger of arrogance and neglect of the gods. The role of Solon himself in this enigmatic story also strikes me as particularly significant. This distinguished Athenian legislator did indeed travel to Egypt to deeply study the laws, wisdom, and invaluable historical knowledge of this most ancient people. Many ancient sources confirm that Solon was known for his tireless pursuit of knowledge gleaned from the experience of other civilizations, so as to use it to improve life in his native Athens. That is why his turning to the Egyptian priests for ancient knowledge seems not only historically convincing, but also absolutely logical. Thus, although direct Egyptian written sources openly mentioning Atlantis, alas, have not reached us, The very idea of the Egyptian origin of the story is quite plausible from a historical point of view, which I consider important. It would seem that Atlantis was forever linked only with Egypt and Greece. However, the connection of Atlantis with the ancient civilizations of America began to capture my attention immediately after the grand discovery of the New World by Europeans at the end of the 15th century. The first Spanish conquistadors and brave travelers were deeply astonished by their encounter with the previously completely unknown cultures of the Maya, Aztecs, and later the Incas. These peoples possessed such a stunning level of development that Europeans immediately wondered, could the inhabitants of these mysterious lands be direct descendants of some ancient, hitherto unknown civilization, perhaps even that very Atlantis about which Plato once wrote? One of the first who seriously considered a possible, incredible connection between Atlantis and the cultures of Central America was the Spanish monk and chronicler Bartolomé de las Casas. I imagine how, observing the majestic cities of the Maya and Aztecs, their impressive pyramids, complex writing systems, astonishingly accurate calendars, and profound astronomical knowledge, he speculated that such phenomenal achievements could not have appeared accidentally. Las Casas and other Spanish chroniclers of that time noted in their writings that the cultural level of the peoples of America completely contradicted their notions of savages and was comparable to the greatest civilizations of the ancient world. Therefore, they intuitively began to seek an explanation for such high, inexplicable achievements, precisely in ancient legends about perished states. The striking association between the monumental pyramidal structures of ancient American civilizations and the majestic pyramids of Egypt became particularly strong in the imagination of Europeans. Although these structures differed significantly in their purpose and internal structure, the very idea of the pyramid as a universal form of architectural expression of monumentality immediately led researchers to think about possible contacts between ancient peoples spanning the Atlantic Ocean. They seriously believed that the inhabitants of Atlantis might have been pioneers who transferred these ideas and architectural principles across the vast ocean, thereby founding civilizations on the American continent. No less, and sometimes even greater, interest was aroused by mythological similarities. One of the most striking examples of such surprising parallels is the legend of the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl and analogous figures in the mythology of other peoples of Central and South America. Quetzalcoatl, or the feathered serpent, was one of the principal deities of the Mesoamerican peoples, credited with bringing invaluable knowledge, writing, the calendar, crafts, agriculture, and laws to humanity. After the Spanish conquest, chroniclers began to describe him as a fair-skinned and bearded god who mysteriously arrived from across the sea, although in pre-Columbian sources, as I know, such descriptions are not found. According to some Aztec and Mayan legends, Quetzalcoatl, having completed his great mission, left the people but promised to return one day. It was these later Spanish descriptions of a supposedly light-skinned and bearded deity arriving from across the vast ocean that prompted researchers and authors to the audacious hypothesis of a possible connection between ancient American civilizations and the legendary Atlantis. This image of a cultural hero became particularly attractive to Europeans, as it sharply contrasted with the typical Mesoamerican depictions of gods. Besides the Aztecs and Maya, I managed to find similar legends among the Incas. For example, the Incas told of their ancestors who arrived from across the ocean and founded the first settlements, which later transformed into a mighty empire. These tales of a distant homeland and migration across vast waters found a lively echo among Europeans who were well acquainted with Plato's heartbreaking account of the demise of Atlantis. Furthermore, I managed to find many mentions in the myths of the peoples of Central and South America of a great catastrophe, a massive disaster that in deep antiquity forced people to permanently leave their native lands and embark on a desperate search for new territories. These myths of floods and catastrophes, strikingly similar to the legends of other ancient peoples worldwide, again awakened in me and many others a burning interest in Atlantis as a potential primordial basis for such stories. Nevertheless, despite all these intriguing parallels and striking similarities, modern historians and archaeologists approach such hypotheses with enormous caution. From their point of view, these coincidences can be fully explained by similar living conditions of different peoples, the natural emergence of similar solutions in architecture and social organization, and the universality of myths and archetypes characteristic of humanity as a whole. Modern scientific data, especially the impressive results of archaeological excavations and profound genetic studies, irrefutably indicate that the civilizations of the Maya, Aztecs, and Incas developed completely independently and had no direct contact with the peoples of the Old World until the fateful discovery of America by Europeans at the end of the 15th century. Despite the fact that hypothetical connections between Atlantis and the ancient civilizations of America were not recognized by the official scientific community, interest in the mysterious island did not wane. It continued to excite the minds of researchers and brave travelers throughout the subsequent centuries. This was particularly evident in the Middle Ages and Renaissance, when the legend of Atlantis reappeared, like a ghost, on old maps and in the texts of European authors, stimulating the imagination. You might be surprised, but medieval cartographers and fearless travelers did not limit themselves to mapping only the lands and territories known to them. Quite often, genuinely mysterious islands appeared on these old parchments, unsupported by any real observations, but merely reflecting ancient forgotten legends and myths. One such mystical island was Antillia, which regularly appeared on maps of the 15th and 16th centuries and gave rise to all sorts of speculations about its origin. Antillia was depicted in the midst of the raging Atlantic Ocean, and I know that some Renaissance scholars later linked it to Plato's Atlantis, seriously believing that it could be the same mysterious island, forever lost in the stream of time. Another, no less mysterious island that constantly captured the attention of cartographers was the island of Brazil, or High Brazil. This enigmatic patch of land, periodically appearing on maps off the western coast of Ireland, was considered absolutely unattainable and deeply mystical, sometimes disappearing in impenetrable fog and reappearing to the world only in certain years. Although today this island is considered by me and most scientists to be exclusively mythical, in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, many seriously, genuinely believed in its existence, and some researchers also linked it to the legendary Atlantis, adding a new thread to its tangled history. Of particular, almost mystical interest is the map of the Turkish admiral Piri Reis, compiled in 1513. This map features a strikingly accurate depiction of the eastern coast of South America, particularly its Brazilian part, which still elicits my sincere admiration and the bewilderment of scientists, given the extremely limited geographical knowledge of that time. Piri Reis himself stated in his notes that he used about 20 different sources, including ancient maps, that he attributed to the legendary Alexander the Great, as well as a now-lost map by Christopher Columbus. It was this ominous mystery of the sources that gave rise to countless hypotheses and rampant speculation. Some researchers, such as American professor Charles Hapgood and British writer Graham Hancock, put forward audacious suggestions that the Piri Reis map could have been based on much older, perhaps even prehistoric sources, linked to a hypothetical civilization that they so confidently associated with legendary Atlantis. In particular, They claimed that the map might have depicted Antarctica without its ice cover. Although I, based on modern research, consider this depiction merely a distorted representation of South America, the official scientific viewpoint, which I share, is that the Piri Reis map is a unique, incredibly complex compilation of all available cartographic sources and knowledge at that time. Despite the clear inaccuracies and some mythical elements present on it, this map is a crucial historical artifact, vividly demonstrating the level of geographical knowledge in the early 16th century and humanity's unquenchable desire to study and understand unknown lands. The Renaissance became for me and all humanity a time of active reevaluation and deep study of the legacy of ancient culture. After a long period of oblivion and the tragic loss of many ancient sources, humanists of the 15th and 16th centuries began to study and translate the ancient texts of the Greeks and Romans with tireless interest. Among these precious sources, Plato's dialogues regained wide popularity. Renaissance scholars saw these texts as potential historical evidence, which gave the story of the sunken civilization a special, almost magical appeal and unexpected seriousness. My interest in Atlantis was also amplified by the Age of Discovery, which forever changed the world. The discovery of the New World and the encounter with previously completely unknown civilizations forced European intellectuals to think deeply about the origin of these astonishingly developed peoples. It was during this period that many scholars seriously, with full dedication, considered the hypothesis that American civilizations might be connected to Plato's legendary Atlantis. Seeking to explain the striking similarity in architecture, religion, and social systems between the peoples of the Old and New Worlds, researchers hopefully began to turn to ancient texts, desperately trying to find answers to the mysterious questions raised by the new geographical discoveries. Besides purely scientific interest, I see that Renaissance humanists also perceived Atlantis as a powerful, symbolic image of a lost golden age. Atlantis fit perfectly into their tireless aspiration for the revival of ancient wisdom and perfection, serving as a shining symbol of lost human greatness that one should constantly strive for. In the 17th and 18th centuries, when modern science began to rapidly take shape in Europe and a new, radical, rational approach to understanding the world emerged, Atlantis was not only not forgotten, it acquired a completely new, unexpected status. If previously it was perceived predominantly as a poetic myth or a profound philosophical allegory, now it began to be examined from a strictly scientific point of view. Scholars of that time seriously, with full dedication, contemplated for the first time whether Atlantis could have actually existed. And if so, where exactly was it located, and what real events could have served as the basis for Plato's captivating story? One of the first scholars who dared to rationally explain the origin of the legend of Atlantis was the Swedish researcher Olof Rudbeck. In his extensive monumental work, Atlantica, published in the late 17th century, Rudbeck asserted with astonishing confidence that the myth of the sunken island was based on entirely real historical events that occurred in Northern Europe. He boldly suggested that Plato's ancient Atlantis was in fact prehistoric Sweden, where a great civilization existed in the deepest antiquity, tragically destroyed as a result of a powerful natural cataclysm. Although modern science, as I know, does not support Rudbeck's hypothesis, his innovative attempt at a scientific interpretation of the myth became an incredibly important step, demonstrating for the first time how scientists can analyze ancient legends using the strictest archaeological and historical data. In the 18th century, interest in Atlantis became even more pronounced, especially among representatives of the Age of Enlightenment, who sought to critically re-examine the ancient legend from a new, rationalist perspective. Prominent French scientist and writer Jean-Sylvain Bailly as well as the British natural philosopher and philosopher Lord Monboddo, proposed their own, quite original scientific hypotheses about the existence of Atlantis. Bailey, for example, believed that the legend of Atlantis reflects humanity's collective memory of an ancient civilization that once flourished in the area of the North Pole before a significant climate change. According to him, this most ancient civilization spread its invaluable knowledge and culture around the world after it was forced to leave its lands due to a drastic deterioration in climatic conditions. Lord Monboddo, following the strict rationalist ideals of the Enlightenment, considered Atlantis a metaphor for an ancient and powerful civilization from which perhaps the most advanced cultures of the ancient world originated, such as Egypt and Greece. He did not strive to find Atlantis in a specific place on the map, but believed that Plato's dialogues could be referring to a lost common ancestral homeland of humanity, memories of which were preserved like an echo in the myths and legends of a wide variety of peoples. The 18th century also marked the beginning of systematic archaeological investigations, although they had not yet reached the grand scale and strict scientific accuracy characteristic of later eras. My interest in Atlantis was amplified by scientists beginning to uncover real, irrefutable evidence of the existence of ancient civilizations that vanished as a result of truly catastrophic events. For example, the stunning excavations of Pompeii and Herculaneum in Italy demonstrated how quickly and dramatically entire cities and flourishing civilizations can disappear. These exciting discoveries strongly supported the hypotheses that the legend of Atlantis could have a very real historical basis and reflected genuine, terrifying natural disasters of antiquity. I believe that an interesting feature of the Age of Enlightenment was precisely the approach to Atlantis as a riddle that could be solved solely by rational methods, using exhaustive historical data and irrefutable logic. Enlightenment thinkers firmly rejected any mystical or supernatural explanations, seeking to present Atlantis not as a fanciful myth, but as a historical memory that could help understand the deeper history of humanity and the origins of diverse cultural traditions. For me, the 19th century became a period of particularly intense, explosive interest in Atlantis. It was during this era that countless hypotheses emerged, some quite unusual, others frankly fantastic, seeking not only to prove the authentic reality of the island's existence, but also to explain its crucial role in the ancient history of humanity. Atlantis transformed into a subject of widespread, popular fascination and heated scientific, as well as quasi-scientific discussions, generating both genuinely serious research and countless, sometimes wild, speculative theories. One of the most important figures, thanks to whom Atlantis triumphantly returned to the center of public attention, was the American politician, talented writer, and amateur historian Ignatius Donnelly. It was then, in 1882, that his famous book, Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, hit the world, causing a sensation, which instantly became an international bestseller, igniting a veritable boom. One of Donnelly's most unusual and striking hypotheses was the astonishing idea that Atlanteans might have belonged to a special, forgotten race of giants. He persistently referenced ancient myths and legends from diverse peoples which described colossal giants and titans who once inhabited the earth in remote antiquity. According to Donnelly, these legends could preserve a genuine memory of real giant humans, representatives of the vanished Atlantean civilization. In his book, he cited numerous reports of discoveries of enormous bones and colossal remains of giant humans as evidence. Although I, like most modern archaeologists and anthropologists, consider such accounts entirely unsubstantiated and deeply mythologized. In his formulations, Donnelly divided the inhabitants of Atlantis into two primary races. The first race, he was convinced, consisted of tall and fair-skinned giants who possessed exceptional physical characteristics and boundless knowledge. The second race was shorter and dark-skinned, and as Donnelly fanatically believed, it was this very race that became the ancestor of the peoples who later settled America and Africa. These ideas allowed him to explain not only the origin of ancient civilizations, but also the mysterious, inexplicable structures discovered by myself and other researchers in various parts of the world. Donnelly paid particular close attention to the striking similarity of architectural monuments in the Americas and the Old World, especially the majestic pyramids in Egypt, Mexico, and Peru. He categorically asserted that such a stunning coincidence of forms and technologies could only result from a single, common source. This source, in his unwavering opinion, was precisely Atlantis. Donnelly was deeply convinced that after the catastrophe that destroyed the island, the surviving Atlanteans migrated to the continents on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, spreading their invaluable knowledge and advanced technologies far and wide. Donnelly also tirelessly drew my attention to mythological parallels. In the myths of a global flood, found in virtually all ancient cultures, he saw a direct reflection of one real, terrifying catastrophe that destroyed Atlantis. He argued convincingly that the flood described by Plato could have been preserved in humanity's collective memory as a shared ancient legend. Although Donnelly's hypotheses generated widespread resonance and attracted an incredible number of adherents among enthusiasts of mysteries, serious scientists were highly skeptical of his ideas, and I share that skepticism. Archaeologists and anthropologists relentlessly criticized him for the lack of strict, irrefutable evidence for arbitrary and superficial comparisons of completely different cultures, and a complete disregard for the significant differences between them. Nevertheless, his work had a colossal impact on the popular imagination and shaped an entire direction in the study of Atlantis, which remains incredibly popular to this day. In addition to Donnelly's theory, hypotheses linking Atlantis to mysterious ancient cultures of Africa also gained widespread traction in the 19th century. Researchers began to focus closely on ancient rock paintings and monumental stone structures. In the desert areas of North Africa, bold ideas emerged that before the transformation of the Sahara into a lifeless desert, a highly developed civilization existed on its territory, which could well have been connected with the mythical Atlantis. Such hypotheses were based on ancient legends and myths of African peoples about lost cities, swallowed by sands or forever submerged in the waters of huge lakes and rivers, which once covered significant territories of the modern African continent. The plethora of pseudoscientific and frankly mystical theories surrounding Atlantis in the 20th century was significantly expanded by the prophecies of the famous American clairvoyant Edgar Cayce, dubbed the Sleeping Prophet by his contemporaries. His unusual, captivating predictions, made in a state of deep trance, not only propelled the legend to a new, powerful level of popularity, but also, quite literally, spurred misguided enthusiasts to search for the lost island in the most absurd, unexpected places around the globe. Edgar Cayce asserted with unwavering confidence that Atlantis indeed existed and was the greatest civilization of the ancient world, possessing incredible knowledge and technologies that surpass the achievements of modern science even today. According to him, the Atlantean civilization was mercilessly destroyed as a result of a global, all-consuming catastrophe that occurred approximately 10,000 years ago. However, in his prophecies, Cayce went much further than most authors, not only describing the location of Atlantis' demise in detail, but also boldly predicting its future rediscovery. One of the most intriguing aspects of Casey's prophecies was his unwavering confidence that Atlantis would rise to the surface from the ocean once again, like a phantom, not far from the coast of North America, specifically near the Bahamas. He claimed that near Bimini, one of the Bahama Islands, the remains of ancient structures would be found, which would definitively and irrevocably prove the existence of Atlantis. Casey even indicated that this incredible discovery would occur at the very end of the 20th century. These prophecies inspired numerous archaeological and amateur expeditions, particularly after a mysterious stone structure, which became known as the Bimini Road, was indeed discovered off the coast of North Bimini Island. I personally followed these developments. This unusual object, large stone slabs, carefully laid on the seabed as if by design, instantly became the subject of fierce debate. Casey's followers were absolutely convinced that this was precisely the object the prophet spoke of, namely, the irrefutable remnants of an ancient Atlantean civilization. Scientists, however, approached the find much more cautiously, and I share their skepticism. Geologists, after conducting meticulous investigations, suggested that the Bimini Road could be a natural formation, a result of centuries of tidal action, currents, and seabed erosion. Despite the fervent enthusiasm of Casey's followers, serious scientific research has yet to confirm the artificial origin of these structures, and the overwhelming majority of scientists consider Casey's prophecies completely unfounded and lacking any scientific basis. However, the Bimini Road was by no means the only archaeological enigma that evoked associations with Atlantis. In the mid-20th century, archaeologists and researchers, myself included, began actively studying other ancient cultures in search of evidence, or at least indirect clues, pointing to the existence of Atlantis. Particular attention was drawn to the island of Crete, where in the early 20th century, British archaeologist Arthur Evans made a momentous discovery: the Minoan civilization. Although Evans himself did not directly link the Minoans to Atlantis, many authors saw the mysterious and strikingly advanced Minoan culture as a possible, ideal candidate for the role of the Atlanteans or their descendants. The Minoans were skilled, fearless seafarers, built magnificent palaces with advanced complex plumbing and water supply systems, and possessed a developed writing system, which remains not fully deciphered, something that sometimes drives me crazy. These achievements profoundly impressed researchers and seem to perfectly match descriptions of the Atlantean civilization. Another significant focus of archaeological expeditions, inspired by the alluring legend of Atlantis, became the Azores. Some researchers believed that the Azores, located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, could be the last remnants of a vast, sunken continent, forever submerged underwater. Although systematic investigations here did not uncover ancient ruins or unambiguous signs of a sunken civilization, enthusiasts, against all odds, continue to search the seabed for traces of ancient structures and artificial constructions, harboring hope for a sensational discovery. The popularity of Edgar Casey's prophecies and the intriguing finds of the Bimini Road contributed to the Atlantis myth, extending far beyond strict academic science in the 20th century, becoming an integral part of popular culture, esoteric teachings, and various mystical movements. Despite the dazzling vividness and alluring appeal of these hypotheses, most professional scientists, myself included, consider Casey's ideas and similar theories purely pseudoscientific, based on sheer fantasy, unsupported by any serious evidence. Nevertheless, numerous archaeological expeditions and astonishing discoveries made in the 20th century showed me and the rest of the world that the ancient history of humanity still holds many unsolved mysteries, and interest in the legend of Atlantis remains consistently high, combining science, mythology, and mysticism, which, I confess, intrigues me the most. In the 20th century, to my satisfaction, truly serious scientific theories began to emerge, seeking to find a real historical basis for Plato's legend. Among the multitude of scientific hypotheses, the most convincing and widely accepted by scientists became the one linking the legendary Atlantis to the Minoan civilization, which I already mentioned, and the catastrophic, explosive eruption of the volcano on the island of Santorini, located in the Aegean Sea. This theory was first proposed in the early 20th century and actively developed over the subsequent decades thanks to groundbreaking archaeological discoveries and profound geological research. The main, truly irrefutable argument for proponents of this theory was the large-scale, terrifying eruption of the Thera volcano, which occurred approximately in the middle of the second millennium BCE, roughly 900 years before Plato himself was born. This event is rightly considered one of the largest volcanic cataclysms in human history. The eruption on Santorini was so monstrously powerful that it literally altered the geography of the entire Aegean region. The central part of the island was mercilessly destroyed, and in its place, a colossal caldera formed, instantly filling with seawater. The monstrous tsunami that followed the eruption, reaching heights of several tens of meters, struck the coasts of neighboring islands and mainland Greece, including the coast of Crete. It was Crete, the cradle of Minoan civilization, that suffered most severely from this catastrophe. The Minoans were at that time one of the most developed, most brilliant cultures of the Mediterranean, possessing complex, exquisite architecture, multi-story palaces, a highly sophisticated system of water supply and sewage, as well as developed writing and art. The majestic palaces of Knossos, Phaistos, and Malea, well known to me and other archaeologists, irrefutably testify to the high level of development of Minoan society. According to researchers, this large-scale natural disaster, caused by the violent eruption of the volcano on Santorini, could have fatally affected the fate of the brilliant Minoan civilization. The massive tsunami, triggered by the monstrous explosion, mercilessly destroyed the coastal settlements and ports of Crete, completely disrupted sea trade connections, and significantly, irreparably undermined the economic and political position of the Minoans in the region. Although the civilization did not disappear instantly, this catastrophe delivered a powerful, mortal blow, after which Minoan society gradually declined and eventually was absorbed by other peoples, particularly the warlike Mycenaean Greeks. Scientists believe that the terrible memory of this colossal natural disaster could have been preserved in the collective consciousness of the Mediterranean peoples in the form of numerous legends and myths about a sunken island or a flourishing civilization. Later, after many centuries, these legends could have been adopted and reworked by the ancient Egyptians, and then recounted to Greek wise men such as Solon, and ultimately, brilliantly presented by Plato in the form of the story about the tragic demise of mighty Atlantis. The most important evidence for this theory came from numerous, truly sensational archaeological finds on Santorini made in the second half of the 20th century. Here, under centuries-old layers of volcanic ash, the perfectly preserved remains of the city of Akrotiri were discovered, which I and many of my colleagues often call the Minoan Pompeii. Excavations convincingly showed that the city was a prosperous trading and cultural center, surprisingly preserved thanks to the fact that its inhabitants managed to evacuate before the catastrophe, likely warned by preliminary earthquakes. Despite such strong evidence supporting the connection between Minoan civilization, the Santorini volcano, and the story of Atlantis, This hypothesis, alas, is not without criticism. Some scientists, and I concur, emphasize that Plato described Atlantis as a vast island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, not in the Mediterranean Sea. And his descriptions differ fundamentally from Santorini and the Minoans in many important details. Furthermore, the timing of the eruption differs significantly from the date indicated by Plato, who spoke of Atlantis's demise 9,000 years before his own time. Another serious and, significantly for me, scientifically grounded hypothesis attempting to explain the origin of the legend of Atlantis is the theory associated with the Black Sea and the famous myth of the Great Flood. This hypothesis was proposed at the very end of the 20th century and immediately garnered widespread attention among scientists, as it was based on real, irrefutable geological research and confirmed archaeological facts, which personally greatly interested me. In 1997, American geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman put forward a truly revolutionary theory, which was later detailed in their famous book, Noah's Flood: The New Scientific Discoveries About the Event That Changed History. According to their hypothesis, approximately 7,500 years ago, a catastrophic, unprecedented flooding occurred in the region where the Black Sea is now located. In those distant times, it was a significantly smaller freshwater lake, surrounded by incredibly fertile lands where ancient agricultural cultures flourished. As a result of the global rise in sea level after the end of the last ice age, the waters of the Mediterranean Sea violently broke through the natural land bridge formed at the site of the modern Bosporus Strait. Within an incredibly short time, vast, unstoppable masses of salt water surged into the freshwater basin. The water level began to rise rapidly and frighteningly, mercilessly flooding vast, once fertile valleys. This flood became a real ecological and humanitarian disaster for countless settlements located in this area. It is assumed that the water level in the Black Sea could have risen by as much as 150 meters within a relatively short period, forcing thousands of people, in despair, to permanently abandon their homes. Ryan and Pittman boldly suggested that this very event became the genuine historical prototype for many ancient myths about the Great Flood, which I encounter in various cultures of the Mediterranean and the Middle East. The Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, the biblical flood narrative, the myths of the ancient Greeks, and many other legends could have preserved a distant, barely perceptible memory of this catastrophe, when a vast inland sea quite literally, mercilessly destroyed the flourishing settlements of ancient peoples. Supporting this hypothesis is the undeniable fact that the territory around the ancient Black Sea was inhabited by highly developed agricultural cultures, which at that time surpassed many other peoples of the region in their level of development. Archaeological excavations in modern Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey convincingly confirm the existence of ancient settlements here, which indeed disappeared suddenly and truly catastrophically. Many of these settlements are now being discovered by archaeologists on the floor of the modern Black Sea at a depth of several tens of meters underwater, like silent witnesses to events long past. Nevertheless, the Black Sea hypothesis, like any bold theory, is not without criticism. Opponents rightly note that the events described by Plato refer to much more ancient times than the flooding of the Black Sea, which occurred about 7,500 years ago, whereas Plato mentioned a period 9,000 years before his own time. It is also noted that Plato quite clearly indicated the location of Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean, not in the Black Sea region, which, for me, is a serious contradiction. Despite this, Ryan and Pittman's theory remains one of the most scientifically grounded and widely recognized hypotheses for the origin of the legend of the sunken civilization. It convincingly demonstrates how real, colossal natural disasters could transform into grand mythological and epic legends, preserved for millennia and inspiring ancient authors to create great stories. Another fascinating and, importantly for me, scientifically grounded theory explaining the possible real basis of the legend of Atlantis is the hypothesis about an asteroid impact and the resulting global planetary cataclysm. This theory appeared relatively recently, but it instantly attracted my attention and that of scientists, as it is supported by very serious geological and archaeological arguments. The idea that the legend of the demise of Atlantis could be a reflection of terrible memories of a catastrophic celestial impact began to be actively discussed in the late 20th and early 21st century, sparking new discussions. One of the best-known such theories is the hypothesis of American geologist and archaeologist Bruce Mass, as well as a number of other researchers who link the disappearance of some ancient cultures to the so-called Younger Dryas event. This period, approximately 12,900 years ago, was marked by a sharp, sudden, and truly dramatic climate change on Earth, a return to harsh glacial conditions in the northern hemisphere, and a global temperature drop. For a long time, the cause of this sharp, inexplicable climate change remained a perplexing mystery to scientists. However, in recent decades, a bold hypothesis has emerged that the cause of this global catastrophe could have been precisely the impact of a large asteroid or comet, which changed the planet forever. This hypothesis is based on numerous geological studies that have revealed thin layers of special minerals and substances such as iridium, microscopic diamonds, and other extraterrestrial elements found in ancient deposits around the world. These astonishing data point to a major collision with a cosmic object, which caused massive fires, giant tsunamis, ground-shaking earthquakes, and a sharp global cooling of the climate due to dust and soot lifted into the atmosphere. According to proponents of this theory, such a collision could have led to the instantaneous total destruction of many human settlements and a catastrophic decline in the population over vast territories. It is precisely these terrifying events, some scientists believe, that became the genuine basis for the myths of the Great Flood, and subsequently, the legend of Atlantis. The consequences of this cosmic impact would have been so dramatic and memorable that the terrible memory of them could have been passed down from generation to generation, gradually accumulating mythological and fantastic, incredible details. In support of this bold hypothesis, archaeological evidence of a sharp and still unexplained decline of some ancient cultures is also cited. For example, the Clovis culture in North America and other late Paleolithic hunter-gatherer communities. My research and that of my colleagues have shown that these cultures, which reached a significant level of development, suddenly and almost simultaneously vanished from the face of the earth. Scientists link this mysterious phenomenon precisely to the catastrophic consequences of the cosmic collision, which caused the sharpest changes in the environment and a fatal drop in resources vital for survival. Furthermore, proponents of the theory, myself included, note that the terrible memory of such catastrophes could have permeated other ancient cultures worldwide, becoming an integral part of them. For instance, myths about a global, all-consuming catastrophe, accompanied by fiery rains, giant, deadly waves, and prolonged cooling, are present in many legends of indigenous peoples in the Americas, Asia, and Europe. According to researchers, such widespread prevalence of these legends irrefutably points to a common, real historical source: the Younger Dryas event and the associated cosmic cataclysm, which forever changed the planet. Despite the convincing arguments, the hypothesis of a cosmic collision, unfortunately, also elicits a certain skepticism among scientists. and I cannot help but agree with them. Some researchers point out that direct, irrefutable evidence of the impact of an asteroid or comet of such magnitude has not yet been found. There is no clearly identified crater or other convincing physical evidence of this specific event. Critics rightly note that although the discovered materials of extraterrestrial origin do exist, they can also be explained by other phenomena, such as smaller cosmic events or volcanic catastrophes. Nevertheless, the hypothesis of an asteroid impact remains, for me, one of the most interesting and widely discussed scientific theories, allowing us to explain the origin of the legend of Atlantis and other ancient legends about a global catastrophe that troubles millions. With the tireless development of modern technologies, the legend of Atlantis has received a completely new, exciting lease on life. While previously scientists, myself included, were forced to rely solely on ancient texts and superficial, sometimes accidental finds, today we have truly unique tools at our disposal, allowing us to thoroughly explore the ocean floor and find traces of ancient civilizations even at enormous, previously inaccessible depths. One of the most important technologies that radically changed my approach and that of scientists to studying underwater objects was satellite geodesy, an incredibly precise sonar mapping of the seabed. These technologies allow for the creation of astonishingly detailed maps of the ocean floor with unprecedented accuracy. For example, in the late 20th century, satellites equipped with high-precision radars were able to thoroughly explore large areas of the ocean floor for the first time. Using them, astonishing structures resembling the ruins of ancient cities, distinct roads, high walls, and even pyramids were discovered in various, sometimes completely unexpected regions of the ocean. Such findings immediately gave rise to the bold hypothesis that these objects might be directly related to the mythical Atlantis. The most well-known and hotly debated discoveries of recent times have been the underwater structures found off the coasts of Japan, Cuba, and Spain. These findings became a real sensation and provoked lively, sometimes fierce discussions among scientists and enthusiasts. The structure off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan became particularly famous, even iconic. In 1986, local divers, to their great astonishment, accidentally discovered mysterious stone formations, there resembling stepped platforms. Many immediately interpreted them as the remains of an ancient, sunken city. My research and that of my colleagues confirmed the existence of massive stone formations that look clearly artificial. Many proponents of the Atlantis hypothesis claim that these are irrefutable sunken ruins of an ancient civilization, possibly connected to the Atlanteans. However, official science exercises the utmost caution in such conclusions. Geologists, I believe, tend to consider the Yonaguni structures to be of natural origin, formed under the influence of erosion and tectonic processes. They argue that regular geometric shapes can indeed be created by nature itself and provide numerous examples of similar natural formations in other parts of the globe. Despite this, the fierce debates about the origin of the Yonaguni monuments continue to this day, giving me no peace. Another equally sensational discovery was made in the early 2000s off the coast of Cuba. Canadian researchers Paulina Zalitsky and Paul Weinsweig discovered unusual, astonishing structures with distinct geometric shapes at a depth of about 600-700 meters off the coast of the Guanahatabibes Peninsula. These shapes eerily resembled streets, squares, buildings, and even pyramids composed of massive, colossal stone blocks. The discovery immediately attracted proponents of the Atlantis theory, who considered it direct, irrefutable proof of the existence of an ancient, incredibly highly developed civilization. However, the depth at which these structures are located raises very serious questions for me and for the entire scientific community. Geologist Manuel Iturralde, who participated in the initial investigations, noted that for such structures to be at their current depth, they must have been built at least 50,000 years ago. This sharply, categorically, contradicts everything known to modern archaeology about the development of human civilizations. Consequently, official scientists believe that these formations most likely have a natural origin. Although I confess, there is still no single opinion on this matter within the scientific community. Due to the lack of subsequent large-scale research and the difficulty of accessing the site, the question remains open, beckoning to me and other researchers. The underwater formations discovered off the coast of Spain, right in the Strait of Gibraltar area, seem no less intriguing to me. Satellite images and sonar studies revealed strange, sometimes eerie structures on the seabed here, remarkably resembling man-made walls, distinct roads, and mysterious lines. These findings also became the source of many theories about a sunken civilization near the legendary Pillars of Hercules, so clearly mentioned by Plato. However, here too, the scientific community adopts an extremely cautious stance, leaning towards the opinion that these structures were formed naturally as a result of powerful underwater currents and age-old erosion. Modern studies of the ocean floor have convincingly shown me that it indeed holds many mysterious formations that at first glance look man-made and evoke strong associations with the legendary Atlantis. Nevertheless, the overwhelming majority of such objects are currently explained by geological processes and natural phenomena. Despite this, these intriguing discoveries continue to inspire me, other researchers, and all lovers of mysteries to further investigations and offer an undying hope for new, sometimes astonishing, sometimes shocking discoveries, alongside serious scientific attempts to explain the origin of the myth of Atlantis. There has always existed a range of pseudo-scientific and alternative theories that lent the legend a particularly vivid, almost wild and fantastic character. While the scientific community traditionally treats such hypotheses with great skepticism and even outright irritation, these versions gain incredible, astonishing popularity among the general public. The reason, it seems to me, lies not only in people's natural curiosity, but also in their insatiable desire to explain the unknown through mysterious and incredibly appealing images of the supernatural and even the extraterrestrial. One of the most widespread and incredibly popular alternative hypotheses is the astonishing version that Atlantis was a colony of an extraterrestrial civilization that existed on Earth many thousands of years ago. This bold idea gained widespread popularity thanks to writers like Erich von Däniken and Zecharia Sitchin. According to their bold but unsubstantiated claims, the Atlanteans were aliens or hybrids of humans and alien beings who passed on technologies to humanity far, far superior to modern ones. As evidence for such theories, ancient depictions of beings in spacesuits or flying craft are often cited on the walls of Egyptian temples, ancient South American pyramids, and even prehistoric cave paintings. Although I must note, all this is based solely on pure speculation and completely incorrect interpretations of the drawings, which, as a researcher, infuriates me. Another popular but absolutely fantastic theory I often encounter is connected with so-called portals and interdimensional shifts. Proponents of this version are convinced that Atlantis didn't just disappear as a result of a catastrophe, but literally moved into another dimension, using unimaginable technologies of portals or space-time tunnels. In this truly incredible version, Atlantis remains a living and flourishing civilization, simply invisible and completely inaccessible to modern humanity. Such ideas are actively supported by esoteric authors and various mystical movements that see Atlantis as a symbol of an ideal society, forever hidden from the eyes of ordinary people. A third widespread group of pseudoscientific theories that I also cannot overlook claims that the Atlanteans possessed super technologies unimaginable even for the most brilliant modern scientists. Proponents of such hypotheses are absolutely convinced that Atlantis was a super civilization centuries or even millennia ahead of its time. It mastered technologies such as anti-gravity, mysterious crystalline energy sources, and complex devices capable of controlling climate and even tectonic processes, a truly astonishing fantasy. The scientific community, and I am at its forefront, treats these versions with the deepest distrust and merciless criticism. Scientists consider such hypotheses purely speculative and completely unsubstantiated, as they are not supported by a single archaeological find or any serious evidence whatsoever that could pass stringent scientific scrutiny. Moreover, such theories are often based on arbitrary, fabricated interpretations of ancient images and texts, as well as gross manipulation of facts and outright shameful forgeries. Why are these hypotheses so incredibly popular despite the obvious skepticism of scientists? I will explain it. Firstly, people have always felt a burning interest in the mysterious and the unknown, seeking to explain unusual phenomena through mystical and fantastic ideas. Atlantis fits perfectly into this approach, as it represents an ancient civilization that vanished without a trace, making it easy to fill it with any, even the boldest, desired fantastic details. Secondly, alternative hypotheses perfectly exploit the insatiable human desire for sensations and mysteries. Such versions are much more easily grasped by a wider audience than complex scientific explanations. The idea of ancient astronauts or mysterious portals is far more appealing to the popular consciousness than the painstaking work of archaeologists or geologists. And finally, pseudoscientific theories often rely on the human, deeply rooted desire to believe in older, wiser, and more perfect civilizations capable of solving all the problems of modern society. In this regard, Atlantis becomes for us an ideal society that we could rediscover and use as an inexhaustible source of knowledge and inspiration. Today, among professional scientists, myself included, a rather restrained and extremely cautious attitude towards the legend of Atlantis prevails. After centuries of fierce debates, painstaking research, and countless hypotheses, scientists have come to a common, consolidated conclusion that Atlantis, in the form in which Plato described it in such detail, most likely never existed. However, this by no means signifies that researchers completely reject the significance of the myth itself. On the contrary, for archaeologists, historians, and geologists, Atlantis has become an important, almost cult-like symbol, allowing me and my colleagues to study historical processes, ancient catastrophes, and even the mysterious mechanisms of myth creation. Archaeologists, and I foremost among them, approach the legend of Atlantis from the standpoint of the most stringent scientific methodology. Modern archaeological studies do not confirm the existence of a civilization like the one described by Plato on an island or continent in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Despite my numerous attempts and the attempts of other scientists to find the ruins of Atlantis, scientifically confirmed archaeological evidence that could link the myth with a real city or civilization, unfortunately, does not exist today. Nevertheless, archaeologists emphasize that the very search for Atlantis gave a powerful impetus for the study of previously little-known cultures and ancient settlements, such as the Minoans on Crete, the mysterious Guanches on the Canary Islands, or the cultures of the ancient Mediterranean. Thus, the myth itself turned out to be not only a beautiful fiction, but also a useful stimulus for genuinely serious scientific research. Historians today primarily view Atlantis as a brilliant allegorical tale created by Plato to convey deep philosophical ideas. In the opinion of most modern historians, and I agree with them, Plato skillfully used elements of real historical events and the cultural memories of the peoples of the Mediterranean, combining them into a single, vivid, and incredibly instructive image. Thus, Atlantis was a profound philosophical parable, brilliantly illustrating moral lessons about vanity, the inevitable demise of civilizations, and the tragic consequences of losing morality. For historians, it is of particular interest how ancient peoples preserved memories of real, sometimes horrifying events, such as natural disasters or bloody wars, passing them down from generation to generation and gradually transforming them into fascinating myths and legends. Geologists also played a key, invaluable role in my and the general scientific investigation of Atlantis. Modern geology irrefutably confirms that a large island or continent in the center of the Atlantic Ocean could not have submerged within such a short historical period without extremely serious and clearly visible traces. The most detailed geological studies of the ocean floor, conducted using advanced sonar and satellites, have revealed no evidence of a sunken major continent in the middle of the Atlantic. However, geological data has provided me and other scientists with invaluable information about other ancient catastrophes that could well have become the basis for the legend of Atlantis. For example, the powerful eruption of the Santorini volcano in the Aegean Sea, catastrophic all-consuming floods and tsunamis in the Mediterranean, or the sudden flooding of the Black Sea region after the end of the Ice Age. These events were truly immense in scale and could have left an indelible, terrifying impression in the collective memory of ancient peoples. Furthermore, in modern science, Atlantis has become for me a convenient, vivid example for studying how myths are born and how real, sometimes horrifying, events are transformed into captivating legends, imbued with deep symbolic meaning and important moral lessons. Scientists, and I agree with them, emphasize that the legend of Atlantis gained such colossal popularity precisely because it reflected universal, deep-seated fears of the sudden demise of civilization, of losing moral guidance, and of the relentless, unpredictable power of nature. For over 2 millennia, the story of Atlantis has tirelessly inspired and deeply intrigued humanity, having traveled a path from Plato's dry philosophical dialogues to grand modern scientific expeditions and incredible, sometimes wild, hypotheses. Perhaps Atlantis was indeed a real, now lost ancient civilization, a terrifying memory of which has been preserved in ancient myths. Perhaps it is simply a brilliant parable created so that people might reflect on the ruinous consequences of their pride and boundless greed. Or perhaps it represents a powerful symbol of how fragile and vulnerable our world is in the face of all-consuming natural disasters and sudden, irreversible changes. I do not know the answer. What, then, is Atlantis to me? And what is it to you, dear listeners? Is it a real, but yet undiscovered civilization, some deep philosophical lesson? Or simply an incredibly beautiful story told by an ancient sage? I leave this question open and suggest you choose for yourselves what to believe. The mystery remains a mystery. Thank you for embarking on this fascinating journey through the ages with me. If this story resonated with you, please like it. Share your thoughts in the comments. I will be very interested to read them. And of course, subscribe to my channel, not to miss many more fascinating stories and unsolved mysteries. See you soon in the next episodes.